Hey guys, what is up? Hey, so I think that Hangouts changed to the link on me again. It's done that a couple of times. I'm going to grab a new link and put it in the chat, and you guys can join off of that, hopefully. Can you guys hear me right now? I'm getting no sound. And I know there's some people that are in the original Hangouts that I sent. Unfortunately, I can't start that one as a broadcast because they changed the link. So hopefully you'll see this link here in the chat window and get connected. All right, there's the link one more time. Hopefully people will see that and they'll join in. I know Brian and a couple other folks, sorry, you guys are on the old one. And I don't know why they do that. They've done that to me twice now. So anyways, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. I'll go ahead and I'll just start going through some questions so we don't waste our time. And hopefully more people can join into this live chat. Let's see. I think I've got somebody here who joined. No, it's still just me. All right. Okay, so first of all, recommendations on books was somebody's question. So I have a dedicated to my top 10 favorite books on astral projection. Cool. Okay, you guys can hear me good. So I've got a video that's already made. It's dedicated to my top 10 favorite books on astral projection. If you just do a search on my channel, or actually I can post a link in the description after this video is done, or after this live chat is done, and you guys can watch that. As far as more books on top of that, I've gotten a few requests over the last few months to make another video, my top 11 through 20, because people have gone through those top 10 and they were interested in hearing more. So that is on my up and coming list of videos to produce. So watch for that. It'll be in the next month or so. Cool. All right. So recommendations on books, start with that video on the top 10. And if you want more than that, then like I said, just wait for a little bit and I'll get you another list. All right, next question. Is there any risk to your sanity in projecting? And I liked the comment this person said, maybe I should be asking somebody who hasn't sawed their marital bed in half. So that kind of cracked me up, because for those of you who have watched my channel for any amount of time, you may have heard that my wife and I purchased separate beds. We actually sleep on twin beds that are about an inch apart. And that way, when she moves around in the night, it doesn't disrupt me at all, and it doesn't mess up my practice. So as far as any risks to your sanity, I would say serious risks, probably not. I think more than anything, like what Robert Monroe says, is it gives you a different overview, is the way that he puts it. And if you read, even in Robert Monroe's third book, when he's like 30 plus years into his practice, he still seems, fairly sane. And he's got a lot of crazy experiences. And so, judge that as you will, as to whether or not that's his sanity leaving. But he still seems like he's fairly sane. He was still holding down a job. He was still running a radio company, a successful businessman. He started the Monroe Institute. He's doing all of these things in the physical world, and it's not like he's just clicked out and lives primarily in the non-physical. So looking at somebody who's been doing this for decades and decades, I would say is probably a better indicator than myself. One thing that I have noticed in regards to this different overview, or this different perspective, is that I tend to compare things in the physical world now to things in the non-physical world. And that would be the only caveat where I would say maybe it's not always a good thing. And an example of that is just the other day, I saw a sunset, and my first thought was, wow, that's beautiful, but I've seen better in the non-physical. And, you know, and when you're comparing things in the physical world to the non-physical world, and the non-physical world tends to just be more vibrant and more lively, I suppose. I don't know. It just seems like you've got more powerful, more intense sensations and senses. It's really difficult to not start comparing the two. But as long as you're, you know, well grounded in both, I would say that there's not any serious risks to your sanity. So there's my 2 cents on that. Looks like nobody is in yet. I'm going to post this link one more time just in case anybody wants to come into the live chat. All right. What does your wife think about your practice? LOL. She's incredibly supportive. I will say there were some times in the beginning where she was worried, probably because I was putting so much time. I've mentioned before, I've probably put more time into this practice than college degrees and high school and anything else in my life. I've read, you know, almost everything that I read these days, and almost everything I research has to do with this practice. Even at this point, even after I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can proceed and progress without additional assistance, just my attention is taken up by this just so often. So in the early days, I will say my wife was worried. She was concerned about it. She was worried I was going to go off and find an astral wife and an astral family and just lose interest in this physical world completely. I think after 3.5 years, she's come to see that that's not the case, and she's not as worried as she used to be. Like I said, she supported me in getting 2 separate beds. And she's taken an interest in my channel. She's one of the moderators on the Facebook group. She's been playing with ramp timers, trying to induce some sort of non-physical sensations at night recently, which I have to say is thrilling. I'm really excited to have somebody that close to me interested in this practice. So I'm going to hopefully do everything I can to help her get there. Do your religious beliefs... Oh, hang on one second. I think I saw Brian pop up. Hey, Brian, are you on the live chat?
Yeah. Hear me okay?
I see you on there. I just can't hear you. I wanted to see if you've got any 2 cents to throw in here.
You should be able to hear me. Does anybody in chat hear me?
All right. Well, I cannot hear anything from Brian. I'm going to go ahead and I'll continue, and hopefully we'll get this figured out. I apologize. I am such a noob at this Facebook or Hangout stuff. Did your religious beliefs change after your astral projection? Not after. This is actually something I haven't talked about much on my channel. So I spent the first maybe 25 years of my life very deeply ingrained in what I would consider to be a fundamentalist Christian religion. All right. Sorry, still working out the kinks. Now you can't see me. Now you can. Good. All right. So I spent the first probably 25 years of my life very ingrained in what I would consider a fundamentalist Christian religion. Very, very strict, dictate everything you think, everything you do. And I was fully brainwashed. I know that's not a great term for those of you that are religious. I felt like I was brainwashed in this practice in that I didn't do any thinking for myself. Near the end of my, I sort of became disenchanted with that religion, and over a 10-year period of time, I lost interest in it more and more as I discovered more and more things outside of this religion that I just found to be worthwhile and I wanted to experience in this life. So as far as my impact my relation from religion to projection, this whole practice actually started as sort of a distraction for me to take my mind off of this religion that I was leaving that had been such a big part of my life for so long. So in January of 2014, I started studying lucid dreaming, and that was specifically to get my mind off of these religious practices that had just dictated my life for so long, just to give me something else to study, something else to think about. Um, so I studied lucid dreaming. That very quickly turned into research regarding astral projection, and then the rest is kind of history. As far as whether or not it's changed my belief on religion, after my sort of disenchantment with the Christian religion, I fell into an agnostic / atheist viewpoint. So I wouldn't say projection has changed my perspective on that at all yet, primarily because I haven't met any higher beings or anybody that says, here's really what you should be believing in, that kind of thing. But I would say, no, for me, it has not changed my perspective so much. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to mess with Hangouts for a moment because nobody can hear Brian, and it looks like he's talking. Let me just make sure I don't have him muted here.
Hello, can you hear me?
All right. Okay, so nobody is muted currently. Brian, I've got your volume all the way up. Could Daniel or Jake, could you try talking as well, just to see if we can get the sound to come through? No. I am not hearing anything at all. Not from you guys. Looks like Jake just muted himself again. That's fine. Yeah, I don't know. I've got you guys unmuted. From my end, everything looks okay, but it's not working for you, huh? Daniel, can you let me know in the chat if you're on the live chat? Can you let me know if there, or if you can hear me,
hey,
or
Mike.
if you can just say something. Brian says,
Yeah.
Fiddle with the audio settings again. All right, give me 1 second again. Sorry, guys. I'm going to change the headset default.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh, I just heard something. Hey, Brian, you there?
I'm here.
I'm here as well. Can you hear me?
I hear you clicking in and out.
Oh, no.
Can you hear me?
It's like we got a bad audio connection. I just hear you little blips of your voice coming in and out. How about you, Daniel? Can you try saying something here? I just want to see if it's my connection or if it's your
Can you
guys'
hear me?
connection.
Yeah, I'm saying something now. I think you can hear us on the YouTube live feed, but not the Hangouts.
Okay. So I can hear you,
okay.
but it's very choppy. I can't tell what anybody's saying.
I can hear them
Hold on
okay.
just a second here.
Hey, Brian, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you as well.
Yeah.
Might be Mike's connection.
It's like we can talk to each other, but not on face.
All right. I don't know. I don't know if it's it might be my internet connection. Not sure what else to change here. Oh, I've got one thought. One more try here. Hang on 1 second. Oh, it just froze up completely.
You can't hear any of us still? Because I can hear myself on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I can hear you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you guys fine.
Oh no.
I can hear everyone fine except for the host, which is weird.
Maybe it's his connection.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian,
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine. Do you know where is Mike? Or he just left? Is the stream still on?
Yeah, the stream's on.
Oh, he joined. Hey, Mike, maybe try making Brian a mod.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hang on one second. My computer just
But
blue
can you hear
screened. Yes, I can now. Everything's clear.
Must be
Yes.
the Astral Police.
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. All right. I think we're back. And so you said, Daniel, make Brian an admin. Is that what you said?
Yeah, a mod, so he can control the room.
Not sure if I can do that or not. All right. Well, it looks like everything's working at the moment. Maybe we can continue here. All right. So, sorry guys. Hang on one second. All right. Let me go back to the latest question here. Who in the comments is on a spiritual path? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You guys can continue just chat amongst yourselves there. Let me go back a minute, just so since we've got Brian and some other folks on the phone or on the live hangout. So as far as the first question was, do you feel like projection or this practice of projection has impacted your sanity one way or the other? And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that. I threw in my 2 cents, but I'd love to have some more conversation.
For me, I actually feel like it's made me more sane and more grounded.
Okay.
Because I get to practice a lot of stuff and without limitations and things.
Yeah, all the mindfulness practice that goes along with that, I would say, is it definitely adds to the, I guess maybe the appreciation of the real world more. I'm not sure if sanity one way or the other, but what about you, Brian?
I would use the same word, grounded, just because I have learned to use my own discernment with information that I receive a lot better since I started astral projecting. And before, it was hard to get grounded just because there's so many different concepts and opinions and things. And then when I started to investigate things for myself or have my own experiences with astral projection, it was a lot easier to use my own discernment because I had personal experience.
Cool.
So,
Hey, Jake, I see you're on the line and you stayed quiet, but do you want to say anything here?
Oh, I don't. I haven't had any OBs lately.
Okay. Cool. All right. Let's see. Recommendations on books. Okay, so that was the very first question that I took, and I basically just said I've got a video on my top 10 favorite books. Brian's is actually among those top 10. I'm going to make another video on my next 11 through 20. Any of you guys want to throw in your 2 cents on what you would say is a good book on projection?
I haven't read Brian's book, Dynamic State. That's probably the next one I want to read. Looks good.
Any 2 cents there, Brian? You got a favorite book?
My favorite book is Far Journeys by Robert Monroe.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, that seems like a good time to jump into another question then. I had a question come in over the comment thread that said, does anybody else find that Far Journeys is just very difficult to read? Because Journeys Out of the Body, primarily chapters 16 through 18 are his guidelines on how to induce this state. So it's helpful out of his 3 books for a lot of people. Ultimate Journeys is basically, here's what I've done with this after decades and decades. And Far Journeys is an awful lot of experiences and like repeat tests that go on over and over again, communication between who he calls AA and BB. And I heard from at least 2 people that this book was very difficult for them to read, and wondered if anybody else got anything out of it. Does it make more sense if you project it many times? So I'd be interested in hearing why that's your favorite of the 3.
Because it's the only content that I've ever read that I can relate to a certain extent, especially when it comes to having abstract experiences that are hard to describe in English. He has experiences that are like they barely resemble a material environment, and he does a very good job at explaining it. And he explains all these movements and things with his own terminology, and I don't see other authors doing this. They're kind of, even if their experience was not so physical, they still try to explain their experience in a highly physical manner. So I really respect the way that Robert Monroe retains as much as of the original experience as possible. And a lot of the movements and things that he does, I can relate with my own experiences, like his stretch out. I didn't have the stretch out before I read his book, but after I read his book and got the stretch out movement and some other movements from him, they're basically just improvements of the existing movements or methods of going about my business that I already had. So Far Journeys is like very original, is what I'm saying.
I agree with you there. It's original. I like that he puts his own terminology to things, which is something that you mentioned. So he has like a whole piece of a chapter dedicated to terminology that he uses. Like he uses the words like when he's communicating with these non-physical beings, he talks about how he smoothed and he plied and he vibrated, and and then these are all terms that were the way that he perceived this communication to occur, and he basically defines, here's what this would mean if I was having a physical conversation. So I respect the way that he put a lot of thought into trying to present things the way that they happened, the way that he perceived them, the way that they occurred in his non-physical encounters. I think that's it's definitely an interesting approach a lot of other authors don't take. All right, question in the comment thread. What if I can't get to sleep paralysis? Anybody want to take this one first, and I'll throw in my 2 cents?
Yeah, I'll take over. So basically, you might want to try, if you can't do deep meditation, you can try using dreams to astral project. I don't know if you want to solve the problem of not being able to enter sleep paralysis, or try a different method. I'm just going with different methods. So try dream. It's basically you destabilize dreams to a certain degree that you don't wake up, but you can dissociate from the dream itself, like traveling quickly through outer space will allow you to exit the dream imagery, and it might cause you to astral project. I've done that a couple times. Falling backwards through the ground. Of course, this assumes that you're lucid dreaming. Falling backwards to the ground might help, or any falling sensation that will help you enter sleep paralysis. You know how you wake up from sleep, or from a falling sensation. It might be real or fake, but falling sensation consistently wakes you up. And for me, and for a lot of people, that type of falling sensation will wake us into sleep paralysis, especially if we're in the supine position. So you can try that to enter sleep paralysis. Is when you're lucid dreaming, induce a falling sensation by like jumping off a building or something, or falling backwards through the ground. Anybody else care to add?
Yeah, so I get the, oh, go ahead if you want to go here, go first.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I get there a few different ways, and it depends on sort of the scenario. So using the direct method where I'm laying down and I'm just trying to actively put my body to sleep prior to actually falling asleep, you know, watch your body fall asleep and get to that sleep paralysis state. I actually use something similar to what Brian was just saying. I use visualizations of going down in an elevator or falling, and downward movement helps. This is something I always talk about because it's something that helped me a ton, was learning how to induce micro sleep, where I'm just dipping in and out of sleep over and over again. And if I can dip in and out of sleep over just a few seconds, you know, 5 or 6 times, eventually it's like my mind comes back and my body still remains asleep. And I was just rewatching some of Nicholas Newport's old videos this morning, his Lucidology 101s. And he actually talks a lot about ramp timers in one of his videos, and how ramp timers can be a sort of a method of training for this micro sleep, where you're setting this timer over and over again, and your mind starts to anticipate these beeps that are associated with this timer, and your mind starts waking you up preemptively to avoid being jarred awake by this beeping sensation, whether this is a kitchen timer or an MP3 file or something like that. And so your mind will wake up, and if you can remain completely still, you'll actually wake up in a state of sleep paralysis. And I've done this with ramp timers many times myself. And then the third scenario is with the indirect method, where I'm trying to project immediately on waking up, transition out of sleep. Then my goal is to get my body back into sleep paralysis. And I typically do that through visualizations. I continue breathing as if I were asleep, try not to move at all, and just try to basically trick my body into thinking that I'm still asleep, and it'll fall asleep again. And I don't know what other people's opinion of this particular next statement is, but what I found is that if you're trying to reach sleep paralysis, just keep in mind that a very deep, you know, the kind of sleep paralysis people typically find is scary, where you just can't break out of it even if you want to. That's not required for projection. I've only had that really deep, scary type of paralysis maybe a handful of times, probably 5 tops. But just a light sleep paralysis in order to disassociate yourself from your physical body is all that's required. So that's my 2 cents on that. Go ahead, whoever else was going to say something on here.
Oh yeah, I use soul dreaming, so I basically tell myself when I'm lucid dreaming to wake up in sleep paralysis, and that works for me.
Very cool. Yeah, that's using lucid dreaming and initiating the process from that lucid dream is definitely effective. All right, next question. If you could go back in time to when you were just starting to learn to project and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? My answer is not quite so straightforward for that one. So anybody else want to take it, and then I'll answer?
For me, it's really nothing.
All right, I'll start.
It's a learning journey.
Yeah, it is. It's a long journey.
From the beginning. You can't really do it differently, I don't know.
And that's pretty much my answer as well. So if I could go back in time and give myself one thing, it would basically be this roadmap that I've created. So I mentioned in my last video, it was about journaling and creating this roadmap that you can use to follow step by step. You know, this is what works next, this is what works next. And it took me a good, probably 2 years to find out, you know, what can work consistently for me, you know, time after time. So if I could go back and I could give myself that roadmap and say, here, this works, stick with this, just keep doing it, you're going to make it, that would be it. But there's no trick, cheat, you know, one single tip that you could give somebody to say, this is going to get you out tonight. Unfortunately, that just doesn't exist. And it's more of a rewiring your brain, learning new sleep patterns, as far as like learning to keep your mind awake and let your body fall asleep first. It's a skill like anything else that just takes time and effort. Any other thoughts on that one?
Where is the question in chat?
That one actually isn't. So a few of these questions come from email. A few of these questions are coming from the comment thread of the video where I announced this live chat, and then people are posting comments in the chat thread. So actually, you know what, Brian, if you're interested, I can start forwarding these to you. You're a consistent contributor to this. So as I get questions in, I'd be happy to forward them over email, or I can keep just a running list on Facebook or something and just pin it to the top and say, here's the questions we're going to cover, so you can think about them ahead of time.
Okay.
I'll do that for the next one. That's a good thought. All right. Given the fact that at times you cannot remember your dreams and your past, hang on, I gotta expand my window here. I'm getting part of this question cut off. All right, given the fact that at times you cannot remember your dreams and your past, don't you think at sleep you are transferring from multiple realities? If I understand what you're saying, that would depend on which author you're reading. So Robert Bruce is a big fan of what he calls the mind split effect. And he talks about how you go out of body every single night and you exist in these multiple realities. But in order to remember these other realities in your, hang on, there's a lot of noise here. I'm going to see if I can figure out who it is and just mute them here. And you guys are welcome to unmute yourself. I'm not sure. All right.
Noise coming from
so
Loki.
Robert Bruce, he talked. All right. Hey, Loki, I'm going to just mute you here just temporarily, and you're welcome to unmute yourself if you want to say something. All right. So Robert Bruce, he talks about how you just exist in all these other realities, but in order for you to retain these memories in physical life, you actually need to download these memories, and learning to basically incorporate these memories back into your waking self is part of the challenge. In fact, probably the biggest challenge to, I guess, appreciate this this second life or these other lives. Robert Bruce talks about how it's, you know, we do this all the time, and so all of us are having these experiences, but it's this conscious exit projection that we typically don't have. So that's my thought on that. If I understand your question correctly. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I didn't really quite catch it. It sounds like the person is asking whether or why we forget our dreams. Is that the question?
It says, given the fact that at times you cannot remember your dreams and your past, don't you think at sleep that you are transferring from multiple realities? So you forget your past, you forget your dreams. So are you composed of multiple realities, maybe?
I couldn't answer that really. I mean, a dream is irrefutably a separate reality from our waking life. Not completely separated, but it's pretty distinct, especially if you're into altered states. It gets pretty distinct from your physical waking life. Even if it's curated in your brain, it's still a reality really in itself. So I'd say yes, dreams are a separate reality. We're transferring to it when we fall asleep and enter our dreams. But when it comes to remembering them, I think that's part of the sleep process, really. Have you ever heard about the concept where we enter REM sleep, and REM is a part of REM's function is to consolidate memories?
I have heard of that.
So with that particular concept, it's consolidating memories. So it's in the process of like sorting things out. So we're not going to remember while it's doing that. It'd be kind of weird for it to have more memories to work with while it's in REM sleep doing that thing. It would just task it, you know what I'm saying? So that's one theory.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, that you would be giving it more memories that are and then need to be consolidated because you're lucidly creating memories during your dream cycles.
So I read this book, Life After Death. So it says that if you want to remember your dreams, you need to recall them right after awakening.
Right. That is by far the best advice I could give you, would be to, if you want to remember your dreams, the moment you wake up, before you even move, before you have time to distract yourself with what's going on that day, grab your journal and start writing down everything you remember. And use leading questions or thoughts like, just a moment ago I was doing something, and try to think what that was and try to work your way backwards. And sometimes you'll start with just this little snippet of a dream, and you'll end up being able to remember this entire long dream scenario as you work your way backwards.
Sometimes,
and just doing this and
just picking up a pen stuffs that up as well. If I pick up a pen, pick up the book, I start to forget. So I have to just lie there in bed and just try to, like you said, just try to just go back in my mind. What was I doing before this? Who was I talking to? Keep going back and back. Even picking up.
Yeah, and as you do this,
I start to forget.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you do this, it's almost like your mind starts to say, hey, this must be important, because you're consistently putting effort into trying to remember these things, right? And so it just becomes more natural to remember more and more dreams over time. So you may start out with very little dream recall at all, and then you'll work your way into 4 or 5 dreams a night is not unreasonable for an average. All right. Do you think, I'm going to keep going with the questions in the comment thread here. Do you think that AP is a form of lucid dreaming? My own personal opinion is that it's somewhere on the spectrum of consciousness. I can't say it's anything other than some sort of position on that spectrum of consciousness, at least until I see some sort of scientific proof that this is really me leaving my physical body. And I know I've gone on about this in other videos where I have synchronicities and I have experiences that seem to be outside myself. But being that scientifically minded kind of person that wants to see evidence and wants to see something repeatable in a laboratory, you know, time after time after time, and prove that this is more than just me generating this experience, I would say absolutely. I think it's some piece on the spectrum of consciousness. Is it the same thing as lucid dreaming? I would say absolutely not. My experiences with lucid dreams are easily distinguishable from my projections. A few of those, I've talked about the differences in the past. I would say the primary one is that I'm not asleep when I project. I wake up, I go into sleep paralysis, I feel the vibrational state, and during that vibrational state, while I'm wide awake and I couldn't imagine sleeping because those vibrations are insanely intense and it's just not something I can sleep through, or it's difficult to imagine sleeping through, I roll out of body and I don't lose consciousness from the initiation to the separation to the adventure and then to the, you know, the return. So there's absolutely differences. They're distinguishable, but maybe related somehow. Anybody else want to chime in on that? I know that's a very it's very what's the word? Speculation. It's just my own speculation, I suppose.
Very technical.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, and it's everybody. Everybody's got their own opinion on it. And if you've had experiences, you know, William Buhlman, he had his very first experience, and he said, "Hey, I just got out of my body, and now I absolutely know that there's life after death, and that I go on." And that was after just one single experience, which maybe he's very quick to decide that, because, or maybe his experience was incredible, or I'm 100% sure that my 25 years plus of being in this this religion that tells me everything that I need to think and do, it absolutely influences my ability to just accept things without seeing proof now. So I'm sure that I carry that baggage with me, and that prevents me from just jumping in and saying, "Yep, this is 100% real." So that's my thoughts on that one.
You might have heard.
Yeah, go ahead.
You might have heard this doctor's near-death experiences. He basically sees his own sister that his parents didn't tell him about, near-death experience, and that she pushed him back into his body.
Yeah, there's a lot of near-death experiences that seem very compelling to me as well. That's a hard thing to reproduce because nobody wants to induce a near-death experience on their own, but I really hope there will be more research on this one day. One of the things I found really interesting that got posted to the Facebook group a while back was the video where they did an EEG reading of this guy while he was in a vibrational state. And I found that incredibly interesting because this was a scientific device that you can look at and he could say, look, it shows energy patterns outside of my skull and this shouldn't happen. And I would love for science to, grab onto this and say, hey, there's more that we don't know. Let's go figure it out. It just doesn't seem like this is a high priority on anybody's list. All right, Ryan Burke says, do you think there will ever be career opportunities in this field besides making YouTube videos and teaching others? Which I will tell you is not a career opportunity. Unfortunately, this is not the kind of topic that's ever going to get you 1 million viewers on YouTube. So career opportunities, yes, there already are some, not a huge number. If you're familiar with Joe McMoneagle, I had a chance to chat with him at the Monroe Institute. He actually spent decades working for the government as a remote viewer, doing astral projections and gathering intelligence through remote viewing and projecting. So that's proof of somebody who made it work for at least a couple of decades before he retired. There's other things like coming up with non-autonomous methods of getting into these states. And then it's more of coming up with an idea for a device, building that device, typically through something like Kickstarter. There's a lot of these dream masks. I funded one a little while back that I'm going to be getting here shortly. That's supposed to help you lucid dream more frequently. And so these guys have obviously found a way to take this idea, the idea of reaching non-physical states, and turned it into a business practice. There's other things like blinking lights and things like that that are supposed to help you reach deep hypnotic states more quickly. I'm trying to think if there's any others. The Monroe Institute has obviously made a business model of teaching non-physical practices. Anybody else think of any sort of career opportunities that are out there that relate to this? Michael
Reduca.
Oh, yeah, Michael Reduca. So he's interesting because I've talked to him a few times since I teach Skype lessons for his school. I honestly don't know if this is his full-time gig or not. He recruits other people to teach for him. He doesn't teach anymore. The fact that he gives away his book, The Phase, for free, you can get a physical copy off Amazon if you want, but he gives it away for free, so he's not making money off that. He doesn't consistently post to his YouTube channel. I have to think that he's doing something else for a living and that maybe this is some side income, but I just can't imagine this is something that funds his practice full-time. Although I will say that I'm not sure that money is top priority on his list. If you've read his most recent edition of his book, he talks about how he quit work and just basically was job free for like 2 years and just happy being poor so he could study this practice and so he could just focus on it and dedicate his life to it for 2 years. So, somebody who's willing to be on bordering homeless for a couple of years, he's not rich, but he's probably not interested in becoming rich. But yeah, a good example of somebody who's done something with it. And then the other authors, I suppose, William Buhlman, he teaches at the Monroe Institute. He sells books. Graham Nichols, same thing. Robert Bruce. He's got a number of online courses and audio courses, and he, I don't know if he teaches or not, but he's got a number of books out there as well. All right, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a weird area for a lot of people. I mean, you got to get people interested in it in order for somebody to sell these books and make money and just get the knowledge out there. Most people, when you talk about astral projection, they just kind of turn their heads away and give you a weird look.
That's absolutely true. In fact, I did the exact same thing when I first heard of it. I said, yeah, this is just nonsense.
I looked at it and I was just like, something you see on TV, sci-fi wise, but now experiencing it the first time completely changed everything. And, at first, who do you talk to? You don't really know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, so you start a YouTube channel so you can find people to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mentioned one more thing. So
go
ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna go back to the topic from before about the about I had a question about maybe a theory on out-of-body experience when you have a near-death experience and the silver cord, right?
Yeah.
My cousin flatlined on the hospital bed. He had terminal cancer and he was going downhill pretty fast. He technically died for a good solid minute or two. And after he had passed over, he went up and he said he was met by who he presumed as the Virgin Mary or somebody like it. And they basically had a quick conversation, and as far as he can remember, she gave him the option to come back temporarily, or come back and live the rest of his life, because he wasn't quite ready to go unless he wanted to. So after she had said that, he was projected over his body in the hospital bed, staring at his body like you would when you project at home. And he had seen himself, and he was dead. He saw his dead flatlined body. He saw that the nurses and the doctors rush in and start working on him. And as he was doing this, he had to make a decision, and obviously he made the decision to come back. And after he thought that, he basically woke up on a table to the people who he saw rushing in. And my question, as I was thinking about that, when you die, the silver cord gets severed, correct?
That seems to be the general consensus, although it's pretty rare for people to actually report that they've seen the silver cord. I've only ever read 3 authors that claim to see it.
Yeah, I have read that the silver cord breaks after 24 hours after death.
Oh, after 24 hours? Okay. Because I was just wondering, because it made me think that if he had died, he saw himself dead, it would have severed, but he was given the chance to come back. Or he decided to come back, at least.
Yeah, so is he reattaching it? Or this 24-hour grace period seems more likely?
He has a grace period. Yeah. Yeah. I actually thought he was crazy when he told me this story, because this was a couple of years ago, before I even knew what astral projection was. I had no idea that, and the near-death experience was basically the same thing.
The first time I had ever heard of anything like this, my uncle he died in a car accident, and he was exactly the same thing. He was dead long enough that they had actually called somebody to come pick up the body rather than an ambulance to come and help revive him. And he was floating up in the air, looking down, realizing how nice it was to not be in pain with an engine sitting in his lap.
Wow.
And he made the decision to come back again and went back down into his body, and the pain came back, and somebody heard him start breathing, and they called an ambulance instead, and they came and picked him up. And it took years and years of rehabilitation and therapy to get back to where he could even walk. But he didn't mention anything about a silver cord. He doesn't know anything about this practice, but I was only about 8 years old at the time, and his talking about this experience is something that kind of stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah. Ever since my cousin told me the story, this was how many years ago, I think about it all the time still, especially now having experienced it. Not in that brutal of a way, but it's something that, growing up in this part of the world at least, or in certain cultures, like this you never get taught anything like this. You don't know anything about it, and then you start having these experiences, and people start going a little bit crazy sometimes because they don't know what's going on. And it's apparent and it's clear that people know all about this, and it's a shame that it's not more brought up in certain situations.
Yeah, and the skeptics that I've heard talk about near-death experiences, they say stuff like, well, they were under heavy anesthesia, and they were laying on the operating table, and they were under all this immense amount of stress, so that could have caused hallucinations or whatever. But when you consider somebody like my uncle, and maybe the person that but where he's dead, and they've actually confirmed that he's dead, and he's got memories from the time when he was dead, and then he remembers coming back, and he doesn't have a gap in memory. He remembers the crash. He remembers during the time he was passed, and then he remembers returning. And obviously no anesthesia taking place at this particular time. So it just seems like there's more to it. And us as a Western civilization, I think that we're more closed-minded to this kind of thing.
Yeah,
I got that idea from Mike. Yeah. So you got the Eastern religions that have talked about this kind of thing from. Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah, I live in the West, in Jersey.
Oh, okay. So, but when you think about like Eastern religions and even so Russia, talking to Michael Raduga, it sounds like people in Russia are incredibly open to this kind of thing. And so his school of out-of-body travel and his phase research center and the work that he does over in Russia is incredibly successful compared to here, because here people, they're just more concerned with other things. They're just not as into it as they are in other places.
Yeah, unfortunately, especially over here, we're very out of tune with the reality of the life we're actually, the planet that we're actually living on and what's going on. It's very easy to get distracted by everything around you when they're stuffing this stuff down your throat, your cars and stuff like that.
Yo, can you guys hear me?
So,
I got a question.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, go for it.
So, do you guys believe that we're living in the heart chakra and there is nothing above us outside of this atmosphere? Everything is within. Do you guys agree with that? You don't agree that everything is within?
No.
All right, so if NASA stages the moon, but we know that they done staged it and they never been up this atmosphere. So with that being said, it's just like pretty explanatory that there's nothing outside, like nothing outside of self. Everything's like within.
Well, so I've got a couple of thoughts on that. Other than I did. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That was all I was saying, bro.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple of thoughts on that, and this is all up to just interpretation of conspiracy theories and everything else that goes on. If you've read William Buhlman, he says that after a while he recognized that these projections were things that were happening as he moved inward rather than as he moved outward. And that these experiences were while they are outside of himself, they're generated internally. So as far as experiences, I don't know. As far as I don't know. It's a good question. There's too many conspiracy theories out there that I just don't know enough about to really intelligently comment on.
There's another one every month.
Also, like
I can't say
when I be like asleep and stuff, I get like this really loud ringing noise from my pineal gland, and like if I fight it, it won't stop. It'll keep going, and like force me into this paralysis state. And then it's just like I can hear the ringing. It gets louder and louder and shit. Sometimes I hear like spirit voices, just different things.
Something's trying to get a hold of you.
Yeah, like I've been seeing a lot of synchronicity too. So
yeah, same here. We're on the same page.
I've been trying to get in tune with self. I started working with crystals. I got amethyst, stropholite, a lot of stuff, a lot of different things. I don't know if that's like boosting these pineal gland experiences or what, but like kind of feels like I'm being contacted. Like I need to go within. But
definitely,
I need to find the courage to stop fighting it. I don't know
it's a scary thing to just let that noise take over you and get sucked into that weird void. But
it happened so much that I shouldn't even be fighting it, like, because it's not gonna stop coming. It just happened like the other night.
Yeah, so, at some point you just have to say, is it going to kill me? And if it is, just let it kill me and you just surrender to it. I mean, that's a scary thought, right? But if you talk about Robert Monroe, this stuff hit him just, he didn't ask for it. He wasn't looking for it. But when he started having this vibrational state and he had no idea what it was, he thought he was going crazy, went to a psychiatrist, went to a doctor. Yeah. And at some point he just said, it's not going to leave me alone. So if it's going to kill me, just let it kill me. And he just let it happen. And at that point he started having these adventures outside his body. It took him a long time and several other exits to realize, this I can always come back. This isn't something that's permanent. This isn't going to cause any physical harm to me. But it's pretty terrifying at the beginning. I know exactly what you're talking about, that ringing.
Yeah.
And then if you just let that continue, that just turns into the most intense. Yeah. And it'll just turn into the most intense electrocution type vibrations you've ever imagined. I mean, it's not something you can prepare for in life.
On the inside. It's crazy.
Right.
And like, is there a difference between like? Do you think that I'm potentially going into a lower dimension versus a higher dimension if I sometimes feel like sometimes I feel like I'm getting sucked through my bed down through the ground, and other times I'll just float up nice and gently. You know, just go to the ground and I'll just go about my journey. Sometimes it's nice and easy. I pop and I just end up right outside my on my bed. And I'll just float down and go outside my door and leave. And other times, I have this feeling of a suction, and it's loud, and it's dark, and it's going real fast.
So I've experienced both of those too, but I would ask, is your experience after that happens, is there can you distinguish between them and say this is a negative experience or this is a positive, or is it just two ways of getting to the same place?
I haven't. I haven't let myself experience the downward, like getting sucked through the ground yet. It only happened twice. It just. I think it just kind of felt negative because it was scaring the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the Earth from a much farther perspective, there really is no up or down. So I think that's just I'm trying to attach logic to getting sucked through my bed down to the bottom of wherever I'm going. The
way that I look at it, because I experience the same thing, is if I don't have that, in fact, I've had that exact same sucking thing where it feels like I'm being sucked through a tight rubber tube and I'm just shot out somewhere.
Yeah.
I feel like one scenario where I just roll out of bed is me exploring and me doing what I want to do. The other experience is somebody else trying to show me something and somebody else saying, this is where you need to go at this particular point in time. And it's more like, I just need to let go and see what's important for me to experience at that time. And I haven't had negative experiences on one and positive on the other. It's just two completely different experiences. It's just one you end up a lot of times somewhere you don't even recognize, around people that you don't know. And those tend to be the most profound because they're not me just leaving my bedroom and flying around the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to experience, but I just haven't. I just gotta do it. I just gotta wait for that to happen again and just let go, because,
Yeah, talking about the sucking thing, but it's not the sucking thing, but it's when you're in the void. I left a comment on one of your last videos. But when you're in the void, in the darkness, and you're just floating there, and you just start getting pulled if you let go, you start getting pulled by something. I don't know if you read the comment, I think, but this time I was getting dragged somewhere, and I looked around and I saw those three beings like pushing me or pulling me.
Right.
But they felt like I got the intuition through that. They were like programs, and it ended up being a really mundane projection. Like I projected to a movie cinema, and they couldn't decide which movie I should watch. And I was like, oh my god.
That's awesome.
So it felt like a tricky kind of program. Like, I don't know. It felt like I was being tricked. But just seeing the beings pulling me was interesting.
That is interesting, yeah.
So
anything else anybody wants to say on this one, or go ahead.
What are y'all's thoughts on this eclipse that's happening tomorrow? Like, do you guys think there will be any spiritual effects, or because people so focused on what's going on outside of, but they don't want to know what's really going on, the spiritual side of things. I'm trying to figure out what's spiritually going to happen, what's going to be the spiritual effects of this solar eclipse.
We actually had a discussion about this on the Facebook group a little while back because there was a full moon coming up, and we had a chat about, does the full moon affect your ability to project? Does it cause more experiences? And there were a lot of people who said that the full moon, whether this is a placebo effect or whether it really impacts your ability to project and your, I guess, spontaneous ability to have these experiences, whether or not it does anything. For me, it doesn't have any effect at all. I've kept track of the cycles of the moon in my journal as I keep track of everything, and it just seems to be. It just doesn't seem to make any difference.
I really don't think it would have any effect.
Other people claim it does.
I don't know.
I'm thinking I'm talking DNA upgrades.
Like waves of energy hitting us type of thing?
Upgrading? Yeah, energy upgrades, light body upgrades, light body activation. after this
Do you
solar.
think that for something like that? So if that's a thing, and that if that really occurs, you think you'd have to be in tune and looking for that kind of scenario, right? You wouldn't think that it would just be a blanket, everybody's upgraded, and now we're all more enlightened, because there's so many people whose minds are in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like my mind is always I think on so much of a higher level that, like, I don't know, it's crazy to explain. It's hard to put in words. My throat chakra's all fucked up and stuff, but trying my best. So
all right, somebody
So
on the
I had-
comment. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I had my first out of body experience when it was full moon.
Okay.
So
So maybe
I
it
read
made
this.
a difference for you.
Yeah. So I read this blog. It said that if you do meditation, you challenge specific demons or yoga.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if
Oh, yeah.
there's going to be any kind of major shifts just because of an eclipse. I mean, maybe it's a sign that something potentially is going to be coming sooner, but I don't think the eclipse is really going to have an effect on them too much, as far as I can been reading and stuff.
I had another question. So would you guys agree that the universe is within, or is this something that people are still gonna
Sorry, you kind of faded out there at the end. I think you said, would you guys agree the universe is within?
Yeah.
I think it depends on which reality you're looking at. So with this physical world that we're in, there's obviously things outside of ourselves, right? We can interact with things with our five senses, and there's things that are absolutely outside of our control. They're outside of our own physical beings. Now, when you're in the astral state, I guess it's more subjective, whether or not you're generating everything and everything is within, or whether or not it's also an external experience.
Because like when you're trying to project in these things, you really gotta like focus in on that energy around. Like you gotta focus on the energy around your body and within your body. With that, like you gotta get into the breathing exercises and different things like that. So like when you get into this astral projection or whatever, it's kind of like it's you're in the universe type thing, like within yourself.
I think that maybe, like, I don't know, but I think like just
And that could be like a reason why the astral realm responds directly to your thoughts or your feelings, because you are the universe type thing.
Another thought on it being thought responsive is that when you're in this physical world, things just don't manifest quickly, because physical things, this lower vibrational state, this is just it's just a slower process. And when you're in this state where physicality doesn't matter, things just manifest much more quickly. I mean, it's like an instantaneous.
Yeah, there's a delay of time.
Yeah. So like in the physical world, I've manifested things and I've seen those things happen over months or over a year or something like that. And that kind of thing, you just think about it and it happens when you're in the out of body state.
Yeah,
so
it's just I don't understand the whole time shift, because like when I was a projection I had, I felt like this whole scenario happened over the course of like maybe 10, 15 minutes. Or maybe I feel like I was actually gone for almost an hour. And then I come to realize I wake up and it's maybe 10 minutes later. It's just, but it feels, because I'm projecting, it feels like the time is moving at the same speed because I'm projecting into the three-dimensional reality. Just, it's I don't know.
I get what you mean. So it seems like time there, while you're there, it seems relative to here, right? But when you wake up, it's been 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like the other night, I flew to Russia, and I explored a train station in Russia while I was out of body, and that's obviously not something I could do in a 12-minute period of time. But when in the physical world,
well, I mean, like different beings or higher dimensional entities can transdimensional travel from here to Orion's belt in a blink of an eye. But if you get into that aspect of that type of travel, just dematerializing and going into a void, I think it's pretty much the same thing. I don't know. I think they're just doing. it's possible that they're doing it on a conscious level. And we're breathing and we're trying to get into that state of mind. We're just trying to keep ourselves awake consciously to do the same thing we do every night. We're just unconscious.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right, I'm going to jump to a new question here just in my list. We're going to call it quits here in probably 10 minutes or so. I'll let it run a little longer since I had some technical difficulties and I had to reboot. Has anybody ever been in a sensory deprivation tank, and would you talk about your experience?
Yeah,
I have not personally. I'm familiar with them.
I've been it once. Yeah, maybe about 6 months ago. I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said he swears by him. And it's actually pretty cool. It got me into a meditative state within 5-10 minutes versus me winding down after a day. And it's really, really interesting. I mean, the visuals and any kind of like clairvoyant symbols I'll be getting from somewhere are really vivid. And it's a really, you can't help but to lose sight of what's going on. You get very disoriented after about the first 20 minutes because, I mean, it's filled with 8 inches of water, the same temperature as your body temperature, so you can't feel it really. And you're floating because there's Epsom salt in it. It's pitch black. You can't hear anything because you have earplugs. All your senses are completely cut off. And the only thing you have is your brain. And after that kind of calms down, there's absolutely zero outside influence, and everything comes on pretty strong, pretty quick, and time flies in there.
Have you guys met up with spirit guides and like other entities?
Yeah, I have on several occasions. Although it's different than what other people have talked about. Only in that it's always somebody different. I've never met the same person twice. These are just people that I assume are guides because they're people that want to show me something or that tell me something that seems to be information that's outside of myself. And it's useful information, but it's not like Robert Monroe where he's got the same companion just year after year after year.
Have you ever projected?
So I would assume those are guides.
Like from your house, like you pop out of your bed and you're in your room or wherever. Have you ever walked through a door or a wall and end up in the astral plane or somewhere else? Because that happened to me, and it confused me, and I encountered a couple things that I don't. It was my first real astral projection that I was in control of. This is this past week. I came out of my bed. I popped up. And I just floated down to the floor, and I decided to go through my closet out to the other side to get to my hallway and to get to the upstairs to kind of explore my house. And when I go through the closet, it goes dark because the closet was obviously dark. And when I come out the other side, everything was pixelated. Everything was bright and like fuzzy, like the astral plane has been described. And there were 3 entities sitting like in almost like a room of light looking at me. And I felt like I had the feeling I just walked into somebody's house. I was like, oh shit. I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm at. And there was a little girl. It looked like a hybrid, gray. She was sitting there looking at me, tilted her head, and then there was 2 taller grays behind her staring at me as well. And we were just looking at each other for a couple of seconds, and I basically just apologized for barging in on them because I didn't know what was going on, and then I flew back into my body. And I have no idea what to make of that. But I know that it was like we acknowledged each other, and I basically just ran.
So you asked if anybody else has ever had experiences similar to that.
Yeah. Anything
and some of them. So some of them are intentional.
I have had an
Yeah, go ahead and talk about yours.
Yeah, so I get out of my body and I see my closet in pixelated. So it starts talking to me and giving me advice.
So your closet, you say your closet gave you advice?
Yeah.
What does it tell you?
That's interesting.
Is there something like?
Well, it told me about the astral plane.
Anything?
So I've had this happen a few times, and it's go ahead.
No, I was asking if it was anything worth sharing.
Oh yeah, about the astral plane. Anything about the astral plane interesting?
Oh yeah, so it told that you shifted your consciousness to the astral.
As in, like, let your consciousness guide you to the astral plane. Is that what you're saying?
Like a congratulations.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'd say that's good advice. If you feel your consciousness or something dragging you in one direction, that's like that idea we were talking about, where you're either being sucked off or brought to another location. Some of my most profound experiences have been related to that. So I'd say it's good advice. Listen to your subconscious, or listen to guides, or whatever else.
I've had something similar to that, where it's different because I keep my bedroom door closed at all times when I sleep. And when I got out of body, I came to the door, and instead of opening the door, I thought about going through the door. And I reached for the handle, but then I found myself on the other side without even opening the door. And the same thing happened when I actually went to go to my patio. I did the same thing, except I didn't actually open the door. I thought about it, and then I found myself on the other side. When I was on the other side, I was in a totally different place. I was still sitting on my patio, but everything in the distance was different. There was a magnificent, huge, 1,000-foot, probably higher, actually it looked like a mountain. This tree was so tall, it basically was able to catch the sunlight, and it was still night outside. It was so tall, it was able to catch the sunlight from the rising sun. And that actually was, I guess, my experience of going through a door and entering to another portal, or, or whatever you may call it. And I think initially I was actually in the Locale 1 is what I think Robert Monroe calls it. By the way, Far Journeys is also my favorite book. And he refers to that as the Locale 1. And I started off in Locale 1 because I was able to come out and I see everything. My family members were actually in my living room, and I saw them. And I checked with them later, and they were in the actual spot where I saw them when I was traveling. But after going outside, I was no longer in the real time zone. I was somewhere else.
That's awesome. That's a cool experience.
Do you ever have Oh, sorry. Do you ever have to find yourself like you said yesterday or whatever day you flew to Russia? Do you have to have a specific tell yourself the time, the day, and the year that you want to go there? Because I remember the video you did about saying you went back to a place you were once, and it was in 1990 or 93, and you you didn't really realize what time of the year you were in, or what time it was. But do you ever have to tell yourself that you want to make sure you're going on this day, so you're going there in real time?
I think that you would have to, if that's your intention. I've only ever time traveled by accident.
So okay. It was never controlled.
No, for me, it's never controlled, and it probably could be if I put some time and some thought and effort into making it be controlled and say I want to go back 20 years. But for me, it's just happened spontaneously. As far as the time of the day goes, usually if I'm projecting at night, it's nighttime, and that's not always the case, but that's sometimes the case. When I went to Russia the other day, my intent originally was actually to fly to outer space and I got up to the atmosphere, which I always have a difficult time breaking through for some reason.
Really?
And so when I got there and I hit this wall and I couldn't get through, I decided, well, at least I'm going to travel, because from this height I can see all the Earth, I can see the continents, and I was like, I'm going to go to Russia. So I fly across the ocean, and by the time I got to Russia, it was daytime, and so I don't know. I don't know what causes that. I'm not sure what determines time of day or time of year or year in general.
Yeah, that's so cool that you were just able to orbit. Because my very first accidental, I was lucid dreaming, and then I accidentally astral projected. I wasn't even trying to. That's how I started. And the first projection, I shot through my roof, and I was orbiting the Earth, about the height of a satellite, and it was so freaking cool. But it didn't last because I got too excited. But I didn't realize that you couldn't maybe get out of the atmosphere, maybe. Like, how does that?
Well, some people maybe they can, but I just have a hard time with it. I've tried at least a half dozen times where I hit this wall where my upward momentum just stops, and I'll just start falling back down until I get to a certain height again.
Really?
And my wife said, well, why don't you just walk through a door and appear on the moon or something? And I thought, well, that would be the obvious solution instead of just trying to fly there. But usually I look up at the moon and I say, that's my target, that's my goal, I'm going to fly up there. And I get right to the point where the sky starts to turn black. And at that point, I can't get any further.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe a mental block or something.
Be careful up there if you ever get there.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful.
Just telling you right now, I've heard a lot of things.
Yeah, I've had a lot of problems getting to the moon. Before, a couple of years back, I used to go to the moon as my go-to place just to start in Locale 1, and then I'd go from there. But some weird things started happening. I get caught up in these weird streams of energy that I couldn't. It took too much effort to get out of. By the time I got out of the streams, my projection would have ended. And then there was other times where I'd have these beings that would. I felt them like going all up in my mind and like scattering my observations.
They're basically protecting and observing anybody who's coming in and out. I don't know if anybody here is in the military or studies anything that goes on in the military, but a lot of that stuff is carefully watched.
And one of them was straight with me. He was like, "You need to stop trying to observe the moon, or we will get aggressive with you." No way. I just gave up. Like, I'm not going to compromise my own mind trying to observe secret facilities and things. So
no, you're going to get a knock on your door with a bunch of suits.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's cool.
You definitely, if you're going to the moon, just stay on the bright side if you manage to get there.
Good advice. Thank you.
Whenever I try to do something like that, I end up overshooting it. I would get this burst of speed that's just so fast. I would travel. The first time I did it, I was able to. I think I traveled to the edge of the solar system, and this happened within the blink of an eye. I was actually aiming for the moon, but I was going at such high speed. I ended up in a place where there was just a bunch of rocks or asteroids or meteors. I don't know what they were. And I turned around, and I could feel the speed. I could feel the distance that I traveled. And I turned around and I looked back, and the sun, I could see the sun, and it was just this little speck in the distance. It was the brightest speck, but it was small, it was tiny. And I tried to go back to Earth, and I couldn't find it. And I started panicking a little bit, but then I just kind of threw myself out of it because I was lost. And when I tried to go from one location to the next, it almost seemed like I would jump so fast that I couldn't hit my target.
That's awesome. That's very cool. I mean, it's somewhat frustrating, but very cool experience.
Extremely frustrating.
What, like zipping past space objects that you want to land on?
Just not being able to hit. Yeah. Not being able to hit the object you're aiming for and ending up far off somewhere else is, I guess, what I was thinking would be a frustrating thing, that you can't get your goal. But space.
The sense of being lost was what was really overwhelming. It felt like I couldn't find my way back, and I actually tried to pull myself out of the projection a couple times, and it wouldn't work. And that's what really freaked me out more than anything else. And that sense of fear. I mean, it seems like whenever I'm astral traveling, everything, every feeling that I have is multiplied by 10. So the fear that I had when I was there, it's, I mean, the joy. When I feel joy, it's amazing and it's abundant and it just engulfs me. But when the opposite happens and there's fear, it's horrible. It's really bad. So I was panicking. I tried to pull myself because I know I was projecting. I was trying to pull myself out of it, and it just wouldn't work. I had to try a few times, you know. And I've always joked around with my brothers, and I tell them that, you know, being able to leave, you know, having a hard time leaving a projection is a good problem to have. But when you're in a situation like that, it really isn't. It's terrifying.
Yeah, that sounds like it. I've never had one where I can't come back, but Monroe talks about one where he couldn't come back as well, and it was a terrifying experience for him as well. And I can completely relate to the fact that your senses and your emotions are 10 times as strong when you're in that state. Fortunately, I haven't had very many fear-based events happen, but I could imagine that would be the same as well, because the joy and the excitement and everything else, it absolutely is.
Didn't you fight one in your car?
I did. I did. That was intentional though, and so it was a little less scary than it would have been if I weren't looking for it. But yeah, I sat there and squeezed one in my car until he set off some kind of explosion of white light in my head, and that was the end of it.
That's fucking crazy.
I have a question.
All right, we're coming up on an hour and a half.
If I put it in the comments, but I don't think you may have gotten to it. And this is something.
Okay. Yeah, there's about 100 of them on here.
Yeah, it's something that I've struggled with, and that's one of the main reasons I joined the chat, so I can actually ask you these questions, and anyone else who wants to chime in. Whenever I travel, I feel like it's really feels like a really intense lucid dream. I mean, a really strong, really vivid lucid dream, because in the past, when I was younger, much younger, I had these profound experiences where I couldn't tell my projection from real life. And this is before I even knew what astral projection was. And I was confused often as a child because I would mistake these projections with real life and real memories that I had. And I shared this with a few people, actually really just one person. I'm sure you're familiar with Jamie. She has a YouTube channel. Shout out to her.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
She, I shared them with her, and she, you know, she's giving me some feedback, but I'd like to know what you think. Whenever now that I'm older, when I'm projecting, my projections are still very fuzzy. They're dark. They lack color. I mean, sometimes the colors are so vivid. When I stop and I try to take in the environment, everything is vivid. Everything feels real. Sometimes it feels even realer than real life. But thinking back to the experiences I had when I was much younger, there was no fuzziness. It was just 100%. It felt like I was actually, just like I'm sitting here now. That's how it felt when I was out of body. But now, the current projections that I'm having are extremely dark and hazy. I mean, they're clear, but it's almost like they lack light. And I was wondering, and this is the question, when you project, and anyone else who may want to chime in on this, how clear are these projections? Or are they like real life, or are they more like dreams?
For me, they're like underwater. That's how it feels.
Yeah, when I'm in my room, it's usually a lower light. I'll have something very dim on, but it's I mean, it's definitely as real as being awake right now. It's just definitely a little bit more quiet, definitely fuzzy. Just not as, it's almost like an old TV with not great reception, but you can still see the picture. Nothing like HD, you know.
Still to this day, the first projection was my most clear one.
All right, y'all. So, all right. So next time I get this ringing, and I enter the paralysis state or whatever, do y'all have some advice like how I could get to the next stage?
Yeah, let's wrap up with Chris's question here real quick. I want to comment on it real quick before we move on, and then we'll end with the with your question. So, Chris, to answer your question, I've experienced it both ways. So, what I've come to find is that it really depends for me on when I separate. Which it took me a while to realize that, but there's when I get to the vibrational state goes through a sort of a transformation. So when I very first get it, and if you've experienced it, you're familiar with it. It's like this very crunchy, heavy, chunky, very like gears of two gear wheels that are not aligned correctly, rubbing against each other, like holding a chainsaw as it's going through a piece of wood. And it's very, very rough and very jarring and kind of scary. And I can separate at any point in time once that starts. Like I just roll out of bed and then I'm there. But what I found is that if I can wait until the vibrations smooth out a little bit, and I got this idea actually from Robert Monroe when he talks about the vibrations turning into more of a feeling of warmth and like a gentle hum after they become less intense. If I wait until that point, which typically is right about the point when I can also see through my closed eyelids or see through my sleep mask, then I roll out and everything is crystal clear and like it's just like waking life. If I roll out during the vibrational state, like Jake said, it feels like you're underwater. It feels like your mind is clear, but your body is drunk and you're just slow and sluggish and the room is dark. And when I get out in that state, there's times where I can still salvage it and I can turn it into a much more clear experience, but that requires two different things from me, and anybody else can chime in here after this. But if I hurry and get away from my body, that seems to be step one. And I don't know if that's just conditioning because I've read that you need to get away from your body quickly. But for me, if I'm within 15, 20 feet of my body, then my experiences will be much, much more dull than they will be if I hurry and get out. So basically, any method I can, I scramble down the hall as quickly as I can. And by the time I get down to the main landing of my floor, things have started to clear up. If they still aren't clear, then the next thing I do is I start engaging my senses as much as I can, because what I've come to think is that as Robert Bruce talks about bilocation, and he talks about how he can be in his physical body and projecting at the same time, and he actually talks about seeing his physical body and his astral body from both perspectives at once. I think that there's scenarios where some of your consciousness or some of your some of your consciousness or awareness, I think, is still in your physical body. And so if I hurry and I engage my senses and I start eating anything, food or not, and I start picking things up and I look at them and I try to pull my senses as much as I can out of my physical body and put them into my non-physical body to reduce the amount of consciousness that's left there, that works amazingly well for me. And I don't know if that's why or not, but reading Robert Bruce and hearing about that bilocation and the dual consciousness, it just makes me think that it's possible to have a separation without a complete separation, where maybe some of you is there, and so that's why you're experiencing only mild sensations or darkness or things like that, because the other half of you is still, or the other portion of your consciousness is still remaining in your physical.
Just extremely
so that's
quantum physics. Like when an electron can be in two places at once, type of thing, passing through solid objects.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly that idea. Does that make sense, Chris?
It does. Yeah, and that helps a lot. When you said what time, when you separate, I thought you meant like what time of the night or what time of the day. But yeah, I guess I understand what you mean when you say you separate during because I don't ever get any vibrations. It's not something I've ever felt. But most of the time, I just lay there and I just float out. And I've rolled out a couple times, but I've never been able to feel vibrations, which is something I've been trying to do for some time, but I've never been able to do it.
Actually, that's really interesting to talk to you about that, because I've heard that people don't, that's not everybody feels the vibrational stage. And for me, I just could imagine that'd be frustrating, because for me, that's my signal. That's what tells me, hey, you're making progress and you're almost there, and just wait until it smooths out. Now I can see through my eyelids. It feels like this, almost like the buzzing of a cell phone just going off to my entire body. And it's a very pleasant, comfortable sensation, as where before it was a very rough, like bordering on painful, almost to the point where I've tried to break myself out of it before.
Wow.
But it shifts to this gentle hum. And for me, that's the signpost in the road that says, roll out of body, you're there. And if I didn't have that, I don't know what I would look for.
Yeah, sleep paralysis and vibrations, I've never felt either of those.
So,
Usually after.
yeah.
Well, so I'm not sure how good my advice for you is then. Aside from, I would say, try to engage your senses as much as possible to pull your consciousness into the non-physical copy of yourself. But as far as exiting at the right time without that vibrational signpost in the road, I honestly don't think I'm the one to give you advice on that, because I haven't ever known it any other way.
Well, that definitely helps. It's giving me something to shoot for.
You always use a mask when you're ready to project?
I don't always use a mask. I only do if my wife is coming to bed later than me and I think that she's going to, turn on the light or something like that. If we both go to the bed at the same time, I don't wear a mask. I always wear earplugs, though.
Really?
Go ahead.
Earplugs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and actually this brings us to the question I think we'll wrap up with, the one that Adrian was asking about the ringing in your ears. I wear earplugs specifically because all of that non-physical noise, all the static and the ringing and the screeching and the roaring, all of the sounds that come with the exit sensations, they seem to be amplified or much easier for me to focus on if I've got earplugs in, because I don't have anything outside of myself to focus on. I don't hear the cat running around. I don't hear the dogs in the neighbor's yard barking or the wind blowing through the window. And without all that physical stimulation, it becomes much easier to disassociate myself from my physical body. If I can focus completely on this non-physical side of things. And it's a little bit uncomfortable at first. Earplugs aren't a comfortable thing to wear, but now I've gotten to the point where I can't sleep without them. It's just a matter of getting familiar.
I've gotten used to listening to guided meditations and like binaural beats when I try sometimes, but I'm always afraid that something's going to happen and it's going to wake me up type of thing. So like I'm going to roll over on the volume. So something. But I'd rather listen to the natural hums and buzzes, because I want to know when I'm ready to go.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly the way it is with me. So especially with the indirect method. So with the direct method, where I'm putting my body to sleep, I'm watching the entire process happen, right, from start to finish. And so I have a pretty good idea of where I'm at in the process and how long it's going to take for me to get to the next stage. But when I use the indirect method and I'm trying to project upon awakening, a lot of times your body is so close to sleep already and you're not 100% sure where you are in the process when you wake up. And so if I have earplugs in, typically it comes in the form of these pulsing waves of energy mixed with this pulsating static sound. And I can hear that far, far sooner in the process with earplugs in. If I don't have earplugs in, I still hear it, but it takes a lot longer and I don't realize that I'm making progress. And a lot of times I'm pretty sure that I've actually cut the process short and abandoned it because I thought, oh, it's not happening. Where if I had earplugs in, I would have been able to hear that pulsating psh, psh type sound.
Yeah.
And I would have known that it's coming, and I would have known just hanging there a little bit longer, I'm sorry?
How does the process feel? With the direct method.
With the direct method. So that's a big long conversation that I've got a video on called how to project using Mind Awake Body Asleep. It's about 2 half-hour long videos. But I'll give you a really quick overview. It's basically you lie down, you do some sort of relaxation. Typically, I do some really deep breathing while I'm focusing on every body part at one at a time. Robert Monroe, he talks about the method he uses where he, one of his guided meditations, he looks at his feet through his closed eyelids and he says, looking at my feet, I say to my feet, relax, let go, sleep. And I go through that same process because I like Robert Monroe. And I follow his guided meditation just in my mind through the whole process, working from my feet to my head. And at that point I say, well, I'm pretty much as relaxed as I'm going to get. So then I start breathing very short and shallow. And the reason I do that is because once my body starts falling asleep, I get this very heavy weight on my chest, which is, I think, where the old hag syndrome comes from, or this feeling of being suffocated. And if I'm breathing short and shallow before that hits, then I don't feel like I'm struggling for breath. I don't feel like I'm dying. And so it prevents, any sort of panic, and I can continue to process. From that point, my senses start to shut off. Typically the feeling is gone by then, but then typically it's my ears first and then my eyes second. After that, I tend to go through a series of micro sleeps to try to get the process going a little bit further, and I decide whether I want to use a visualization-based technique or if I want to just wait for the process to happen on its own. And in either case, the next step is typically hearing that pulsating static sound. And if I can focus on whatever I did to get there, typically counting backwards from 300 to 1, just to keep my mind busy with something repetitive and monotonous, then that pulsating static will just continue and continue as if it doesn't like to be noticed, is what I've noticed. It doesn't like me to pay attention to it. But if I focus on this other piece of the process that I used to get that to start, it'll continue, and it'll get louder, and it'll get louder. It'll get more and more frequent, so that the pulses get faster and faster, and it just becomes one big jet engine type roar in my head.
Yeah.
Typically a jet engine roar. Sometimes a screeching noise, sometimes voices, sometimes other things, but almost always a jet engine roar. And always the moment that roar starts is when the vibrations start. They start at the base of my spine almost 100% of the time, and then they shoot up to my head. And at that point, I just feel like I'm being electrocuted for probably a good 2 to 3 minutes is about how long that phase lasts. And it's sometimes intense enough where I seriously am tempted to pull myself out of it. But usually I'm actually getting to the point where I really actually enjoy the sensation, as odd as that sounds. And then it'll start to raise in frequency, and it becomes more of a hum. And like I said, it's more of a cell phone vibration type sensation. And it just feels like my whole body is just humming and vibrating. And all of a sudden I just can see my ceiling through my closed eyelids or through my sleep mask. And the room is always just sort of, it's like what's the word for it? Well, it's illuminated, but not really by any one particular source. It's almost like I just have better vision and I can see in the dark. I don't see light bulbs turn on or anything like that, but I also don't have any problem seeing where my room is just completely dark. So as soon as that point hits, there's no magic separation technique or anything special required. It's just, I just sit up or I just roll out, because at that point I'm no longer connected. It's more like I'm laying just overlapped with my physical body. And you roll out, you get you're on the floor, and yeah, I
usually move when my body gets heavy.
Do you actually feel like you're getting off your bed like you would normally get off your bed? Because the only times I've been able to do it, I just think about floating and I just start floating. I feel like if I try to actually push up, I'm just gonna wake up,
Yeah, which is great. I mean, if you want to float or sink through your bed, then that's a great way to not worry about moving your physical body. For me, it feels 100% like I'm moving. In fact, when I roll out of bed and I'm onto the floor, every single time I do some sort of reality check, typically in the form of levitating or sticking my hand through a wall or something like that, just to verify that I'm really out of body, because I always question it. Almost every single time I question it. And there have been times where I think, oh, it didn't work, and I walk downstairs, and it's not until I see some weird anomaly in my living room that, furniture that I haven't owned in 5 years or something, where I'm like, oh, I guess it did work.
Couldn't you just like? So I've never done that way yet, but I'm definitely gonna try, because I always feel like I'm actually getting up physically. I can feel everything. So I'm like, I'm obviously not paralyzed, but do you ever just turn around and look at yourself like, oh, okay, I know I'm out? Or do you just not? You just get away as fast as you can, like you said.
I've done both, and I've had instances where I turn around and I see myself, and that's a startling experience. But I've also turned around and I've seen nothing in the bed, and I don't know what the difference is or what causes you to be there or not be there. But there have been times where I've turned around and there's been nothing there. William Buhlman actually talks about that.
Oh shit.
Okay, yeah. So William Buhlman, he talks about that, and he talks about at one point where he quit. He turned around and he just quit seeing himself from that point forward. And he asked a guide at one point, why don't I see myself anymore? And they said, it's because you don't need to see yourself anymore. You're in this other dimension, and you don't need to rely on the physical aspect anymore. And you're becoming more and more comfortable with being in this alternate reality. And that the fact that he saw himself there in the first place was because he expected to see himself there. And now that he doesn't need that, he doesn't need that to prove to himself that this is a real experience like maybe he used to, that it just went away. And eventually he talks about how he loses the need for a physical body, and he starts, he doesn't have limbs unless he needs them. And eventually he's just traveling around in the shape of a teardrop. And you lose these attachments to the physical world at some point. And so I think that may have something to do with it.
Yeah, so I've seen myself sometimes, but a lot of times I don't see myself like in my bed, and I will seriously probe the bed very closely looking for myself. And there was times where I even started like putting white light into the general area to see if I can stimulate something and get feedback. And I found that I could stimulate energy center that I like, some sort of energy system that's part of me that I could feel the feedback for. So I was definitely there. I just didn't see the physical aspect of me. And there was other times where I felt a pull from a very specific point in the center of the bed. The closer I got to it, the more the pull was. But yeah, the interesting part was when I was probing that area with energy, and I was interacting with some sort of energy system that was part of me, and I was able to like really feel the feedback, and it made my experience brighter and more like vibrant when I probed with the energy. It was pretty interesting. Like I could see the feedback.
Very cool. That is very cool. All right. Well,
yeah, I don't.
We are an hour and 45 minutes. You have seen yourself?
No, I haven't seen myself when I.
Oh, you haven't? Yeah. So it definitely is not a requirement. It doesn't mean that you're not projecting if you turn around and you don't see yourself. It seems to be, your expectation plays a role in that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's sitting about frustration sitting there trying to figure out why the hell it's not working.
Yeah, don't let that ruin your experiences. Just forget about it and go off and do something cool.
Yeah.
I'm not able
All right, well, we gotta...
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just going to try to wrap this up here. We've been on for like an hour and 45 minutes. And actually, I've got other things I got to do. But I wanted to throw in some extra time since I had some technical difficulties and had to reboot my computer. What I've done is I have taken all of the comments and questions from the live chat feed. I'm going to go through and mark all the questions that we have talked about, and the rest of them I will save for another time. That list is just ever growing. I think there's about 100 questions on it so far. So at some point, maybe we'll get through all of them, or maybe it will just keep growing. But at this point, I think we're going to call it quits. And I really appreciate you guys joining. As always, this conversation is a lot more fun with more than one person. So
thank you.
Very appreciative of you guys joining. And thank you to everybody that was on the chat stream, posting questions and following along. And I will post the date and time for the next live chat here in the next maybe 3 weeks or so. We're going to keep on trying to stick with this once a month schedule.
Sweet.
All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Bye-bye.